What's your biggest fear? Spiders? Heights? The ocean? Well, whatever it is, there's a video game out there somewhere that perfectly portrays it and uses it against you. Video games have been around for a very long time, probably longer than you, and being around for this long has only allowed them to constantly improve and grab the attention of so many people. As video games became increasingly popular, new innovations, ideas, and genres surfaced. This led to the creation of the horror genre, led by the first horror game ever made in 1972, by the name of Haunted House. As the years passed, technology evolved, allowing for better games to be made, and as technology evolved, so did the skills of the people creating horror games. And although horror games are a recurring theme throughout this video, some fears are better portrayed by a game from a different genre. People with severe phobias can feel effects such as anxiety and nausea when exposed to phobias. So just a warning that clips will be used in this video that may be frightening. Starting with one of the most common fears. Acrophobia, the fear of heights. Have you ever been on top of a roof? Or looked out the window of a tall building? Or maybe went for a walk near the edge of a cliff? If you have, you probably had the thought pop into your mind about falling down, and probably get anxious near ledges and at heights. I know I do. Being scared to fall while high up is understandable, which is why it is probably the most common fear in the world. When thinking of games with acrophobia, one game came to mind instantly, The Climb. The Climb is a game where, you guessed it, you climb. Throughout the climb, you climb huge mountains with the goal to reach the top. Once you have reached the top, you move on to even larger mountains. In this game, you're able to get very high up and it's honestly terrifying. And if you look down, it's an almost endless looking drop. In this game, there is the chance to actually fall when climbing, which makes it that much scarier. And what makes it so much worse is that you are hanging on by just your hands, and one wrong move means you could slip and fall. That feeling, knowing that you're hanging off a mountain with no ground beneath you for hundreds of meters, is so unsettling. Oh, and did I mention this game is in VR? If it wasn't bad enough already, you have to feel like you're really there in person and can control the hands that decide whether you fall off this huge mountain or not. The climb also happens to have very realistic graphics, just to make it even more immersive and terrifying. But would you rather be on a mountain or trapped inside of a buried coffin? Claustrophobia, the fear of confined spaces. Claustrophobia is the fear of confined and enclosed spaces. And if the thought of crawling through caves or being trapped in a box scares you, then you definitely have this phobia. Have you ever been inside of a small box or cupboard for any reason, maybe while playing hide and seek as a kid, and you started getting anxious or feeling really cramped? Then Buried is not the game for you. In Buried, you wake up lying flat on your back. However, it is pitch black, but you remember you have a lighter in your pocket, so you start desperately stumbling around trying to get it. And when you do, you flick it on only to make the terrifying discovery that you are inside of a coffin. You try and push the coffin's lid off. However, you are just met with a struggle and dirt seeping through the cracks of the coffin, leaving you to assume you have been buried alive. You desperately start looking around for things that might be able to help you escape, unable to move in the narrow space of the coffin. As you look around, you slowly start discovering things that could aid your escape, completing puzzles in the hopes that you can make it out of the coffin before you run out of air. You start finishing these puzzles one at a time, slowly becoming optimistic of your chance of survival. However, the longer you stay in this coffin, the more unsettling things become. You start seeing haunting things like hands moving and glimpses of ghostly faces. Is it the lack of oxygen making you hallucinate? Maybe the anxiety of being stuck in a confined space? Or maybe it's real? It doesn't matter. You're going to have to speed things up if you want a chance at survival. There really isn't any other game I could find that comes close to this game in terms of claustrophobia. It really brings you to the worst case scenario. Being in a tight space on your back, you can't move, and you can't leave. Buried also includes nyctophobia, the fear of dark. This game mixes so many common fears in the most terrifying way. Being in a confined space where it's dark, and also there's a demon. This game is truly terrifying, and I do recommend playing it if you're a fan of puzzle or horror games. Speaking of puzzles, can we please solve the mystery of why people insist on crawling through caves? Have you ever seen those videos of people crawling through those tiny caves and they're talking about, "This is really exciting, it's so small, I can't even breathe properly, how cool." Yeah, well, if those videos make you uncomfortable, then Crawl is definitely not the game for you. In Crawl, you are tasked to crawl through tight cave spaces and take photos of people that went missing with your Polaroid camera. However, while doing that, you have a flashlight that you need to keep powered by hand cranking it and constantly replace your camera's cartridge for every photo you take. There's also a monster that chases you around in there, which just adds to the anxiety levels while playing this game. The caves you have to crawl through are extremely tight, forcing you to crawl on your stomach, and you have to be careful because one wrong turn and it's too tight to turn back around, making you crawl a lot further in order to loop back to where you were. This game, as terrifying as it is actually a really cool project and is definitely a hidden gem that doesn't get the attention it deserves, so go check it out. It's free, so why not? But what's worse than caves? Underwater caves. Which brings me to my next phobia. Thalassophobia, the fear of the ocean or large bodies of water. This fear may ring a bell if you watched my last video, so if you don't want to hear about it again, skip to the timestamp on screen right now. I actually have this phobia, and out of all the games I've played, some instantly come to mind thinking about this topic. Subnautica is one of the first games that pop into anyone's mind when thinking about ocean games, and personally, one of my favourite games of all time. Subnautica is the go-to pick for scary ocean games because of its environment and realism. Subnautica begins you in a spaceship, and then you get shot out from an escape pod onto an alien planet in the ocean due to a crash. Once you have landed, you peek out of your escape pod and look around only to see, well, nothing. There are no islands, no buildings, no boats, and the only thing visible is the huge spaceship that crashed along with you. You land in a reasonably shallow area with harmless creatures like these little guys. As you play the game, you upgrade your gear in order to visit deeper parts of the ocean and search for answers and other survivors from the crash. However, as you explore further, you realize how less likely the chances of other survivors are, and you begin to face the fact that you are most likely the only human in this massive empty ocean. As you begin to stray further from your escape pod, you discover new creatures, some certainly less frightening than others. The first very scary creature you come across in this massive sea is a creature called a reefback. These are one of the biggest creatures on the planet, however their tendencies seem to reflect that of a whale. These creatures will never attack you, or anything for that matter. They seem to just float around making these really cool sounds that echo throughout the ocean. After seeing these creatures and realizing how passive they are, you may feel a sense of safety. However, they won't be lasting long. Not long after discovering this creature, you'll see something occur that marks the moment this becomes less of an exploration and more of a survival. You hear a countdown from your PDA tablet. You realize this countdown is a detonation for the spaceship that you shot out from. You look up at the spaceship as the countdown reaches 0. The ship explodes. The game then encourages you to go visit the wreck of the spaceship, so you do. And as you get close to the wreck is when you get your first look at just how empty and endless this ocean becomes. The environment around the wreck is an empty, endless abyss, and what makes it that much worse is the fact that it's dead silent. And if the silence isn't terrifying enough, the only time it is ever broken is by a loud roar, and this one isn't the same as the reefback. In fact, it sounds much more sinister. If you hang around for longer than any sane person would after hearing that, then you will find out just what is making that noise. After seeing this Leviathan, you start to get very deep into the game, literally. You begin to explore parts of the ocean where it gets so deep the light from the sun doesn't reach the bottom. At these depths, you encounter new creatures, much larger and scarier than any seen yet. However, Thalassophobia is the fear of the ocean, not the fear of sea creatures. So when I think of Thalassophobia, I think of deep, empty, dark, endless oceans. And also the loneliness I feel being in a huge ocean, which is ironic because when I tell people I have Thalassophobia, they tend to assume I am scared of things like sharks. However, it's actually the solitude and loneliness of nothing being around for miles, which is what makes Subnautica almost unplayable for me, because Subnautica does the most insane job at capturing that loneliness and solitude. When you enter the deep parts of the ocean, they make sure to make you feel as alone as they can. There is no sound apart from your submarine or oxygen tank, there is no light apart from your headlights or flashlight, and there is nothingness apart from the occasional fish or bubbles from your air tank. It is hard to explain just how eerie the ocean is in this game. Subnautica happens to be a strictly single-player game, meaning no moral support during all of this. Subnautica also has a feature in order to keep you inside of the map. The way they do this is by adding a very steep drop-off at the edge. This means the ocean floor just drops and keeps going forever. This place is called the Void, and it is truly the one thing in any video game that has made me leave out of fear. I entered the Void in a submarine, However, due to the leviathans that are larger in the void, my submarine was destroyed, and I was left floating alone in the abyss, and I left the game, and never went back to the edge of the map. And then I loaded up a calmer game. Abzu is a game you may not have heard of, and it is very different to the other games on this list. Unlike Subnautica, Abzu is on the more peaceful side of games. Abzu is a game that allows you to travel through the ocean at your own pace without worrying about oxygen. In Abzu, you travel through the ocean taking in the breathtaking views of your surroundings and the sea creatures around you. The game has a cartoonish style, however that doesn't stop it from being beautiful or terrifying. The thing that makes this game so different is because it allows you to see the beautiful side of the ocean. You get to see the most amazing reefs, seaweed biomes, and fish. You even get to swim with whales or hitch a ride on a fish. And this obviously sounds amazing. However, this game can still be very scary when you are introduced into deep areas of the ocean. Because in order for this game to capture the ocean's beauty, it also has to capture the endlessness of it, which this game does very well. You are able to see these huge formations and plants around you, and behind it, nothing. And that nothing goes on forever. It makes you realize these rocks and plants are so huge compared to me, yet they are barely a speck compared to this endless abyss of water. Seeing this makes you feel so tiny. It makes you feel almost insignificant, and I think that is what is truly scary, realizing how little you are in comparison to your surroundings. But then you see a little cutie like this guy, and everything is fine again. This game is insanely underrated, and I do not hear enough people talk about it. Abzu manages to give such a great balance between beautiful, breathtaking views and that little feeling of uneasiness. Abzu truly makes you appreciate how beautiful these creatures are despite of your terrifying surroundings. Sea of Thieves. This is a game that might not come to mind when thinking of Thalassophobia games. However, I have put more hours into this game than I probably should, and I can confidently say the water in this game still makes me feel uneasy. Sea of Thieves is a game where you sail around on a boat, either by yourself or with up to 3 friends. While sailing around, you can hunt for treasure, fight bosses, and fight players. Sea of Thieves is essentially a pirate simulator, where anything goes. The downsides of this game are the community of extremely toxic people, and also the water if you're scared of it. Because although this game is often thought to be cartoonish and unrealistic, the water in this game happens to be one of the best looking in gaming that I've seen. And although the oceans in this game cause some of the most jaw-dropping beautiful screenshots ever, it can also make some of the scariest moments. In this game, I often find myself falling off the boat while sailing, and usually there is no fear in me until I think about what's going on, as I look up to see my boat sailing away, leaving me stranded in the middle of the ocean. And it makes it that much worse when you look down beneath the waves to see an abyss. The ocean in this game does not have a visible bottom, unless you are very close to an island or rock. However, the islands and rocks drop off very quickly beneath the water. This leaves an endless abyss with no bottom. So when you are in the water and look beneath the waves, it's just you, and that's it. The boat has left, and you're just floating in nothingness. This is what makes me feel insanely uneasy. And when the mermaid floats to the surface for me to spawn back at my ship, I swim as fast as I possibly can. Sea of Thieves contains 2 bosses, which consist of the Megalodon and the Kraken, of course. And although the Megalodon is a very cool creature, I want to talk about the Kraken. In Sea of Thieves, you will realize very quickly when you have encountered the Kraken, as the water around you will turn black and your ship will begin to slow down rapidly. Not too long after, tentacles will pop out of the water and start attacking the ship. And if you aren't careful, these tentacles will launch down, grab you, and then pull you back into the water. When you get pulled into the water, not only is it terrifying because there's a giant creature beneath you, but it's even more scary because the water is black, and you can't see anything underneath. It's so unnerving knowing there is this giant abyss and giant creature beneath you, yet you can't even see it, and you are just floating helplessly. I really like how they do the Kraken in this game, because when it attacks your ship, you can never actually see its body, only its tentacles, which is really cool. However, you can get a look at the Kraken in some situations, such as this part of the Pirates of the Caribbean campaign. I just want to point out, the way they depict the Kraken in this game is very unique and cool, with its huge beak. One thing Sea of Thieves contains that is quite terrifying is something called the Red Sea. The Red Sea is similar to the Void in Subnautica, as it is a means to keep players within a certain area. If you were to sail your boat too far and stray from the map's boundaries, the water around you will turn red and your ship will start breaking, ultimately ending in your demise. It is overall quite a beautiful game though. However, this next phobia is not considered so beautiful. Arachnophobia, the fear of spiders. I don't think this phobia needs much of an introduction. It's one of the most common fears amongst people. It's pretty uncommon for people to not be at least a little bit creeped out by spiders. But just like everything, there's always some people out there that might be a little bit crazy and actually get happy when they see a spider. I mean, they're just creepy. Not to mention there's lots of them out there that can kill you. And there's a lot of games that include spiders, and some pretty scary ones at that. However, many of them only include them for brief sections of the game for things like boss fights. But Grounded is a different story. Grounded starts with you waking up in a big dirt ravine. As confused as you are about how you got in there, you see there is only one way to walk, so you begin to stumble over that way. As you make your way around a corner, you see a slope that leads out of this ravine. However, there are some giant plants that you've never seen before at the exit. Oh well. You keep making your way up. The light of the sun shines bright in your eyes, and as they start adjusting, you look around to see those giant green plants. As you keep looking, you see something move next to you. You look down to see an ant the size of a large dog. You jump back in fear that it will attack you. However, it doesn't seem to care. As you calm back down, you decide to keep walking to find out where you are. You make your way through these huge green plants and find an opening. You can see your surroundings much better now, including a giant structure in the distance, much larger than any you've ever seen. As you examine it, you realize it's a tree, but a tree that's much larger than any tree you've ever heard of. You look back at those big green plants and think to yourself that they resemble blades of grass, and then it hits you. You've been shrunk. Shrunk so small that ants are half the size of you, and blades of grass tower over you like skyscrapers. As much as this discovery shocks you, you realize the sun is setting, and decide it would be best to make a shelter for the night. You collect some pebblets, sprigs, and plant fiber to craft an axe for chopping down the blades of grass. After chopping down enough grass, you build a small hut and bed and rest for the night. You wake up in the morning and decide to explore and gather some more resources. While exploring, you wander a bit too far from your base and come across a cave. You decide to enter it in hopes that there will be some new resource that can help you. You start walking down the cave with caution. You've made it pretty deep in by now, but you step on a stick, and it lets off a loud snapping sound that echoes through the cave. You look down the cave to see 8 glowing dots. Filled with terror, you freeze in place as a giant leg emerges from the shadows of the cave, and then another, then a face emerges, a giant spider with fangs that could bite you in half. Your fight or flight kicks in and you sprint out the cave and start stumbling your way through the grass as you can hear the growls of the spider behind you. You see your grass hut in the distance and become filled with hope. You get closer and closer until you make it to your hut and run in, slamming the door behind you. You're safe, for now. Throughout the game, you come across many more spiders and upgrade your weapons and armor. Even with upgraded gear, the spiders in this game are absolutely terrifying. Grounded manages to get their details and mannerisms down so well, in addition to the sound of their footsteps. And if these spiders weren't enough, there are 2 spider bosses that are even creepier, including a black widow and a hedge broodmother. There is also the infected version of the broodmother, but I think it takes away the spider's realism a bit, therefore not being quite as scary. If you want some more realistic spiders, there is also a game called Kill It With Fire, where you get to kill hundreds of spiders with various weapons. This game may not have giant spiders that can bite you in half, but it can definitely give you some big frights. The spiders in this game hide behind objects, waiting for you to move them so they can scurry away. The spiders also jump directly at your face, which has made me jump more times than I'd like to admit. And call me dumb in the comments all you want, but I only just found out that spiders are not insects. But that brings me to my next topic. Entomophobia, the fear of insects. Much like spiders, insects can be pretty creepy, and also like spiders, Grounded is the game to not go to if you're scared of insects. I already explained the premise of Grounded, but just imagine instead of those giant spiders, it's giant insects, and there are a lot of them as well. Ants, beetles, mosquitoes, and even bosses like the giant praying mantis. I think the insects in Grounded are also really well done. Another thing that Grounded portrays really well is megalophobia, the fear of large objects. If seeing things like skyscrapers, huge animals, or maybe mountains scares you, then you probably have megalophobia. Although there are so many games out there with huge enemies, I tried to pick out some that have consistent large surroundings. Starting with Grounded again. Grounded also fits into this category. Being shrunk down means that everything around you is huge. All plants, buildings, and creatures. Although everything in this game is supersized, there are some things that are insanely big compared to the player, which fit best for megalophobia. Starting with the tree that I mentioned. There's a huge tree on the map that you must go to in order to progress the story. But this tree is gigantic compared to the player and absolutely towers over you. When it comes to creatures in Grounded, there are obviously the spiders and insects, but there are 2 enemies that are enormous. There is a crow that flies around the map and perches on certain structures, dropping its feathers. But the crow is much bigger than the player and could swallow you whole. There is also a koi fish inside of the pond. The koi swims around in the pond, completely shadowing any other living things inside of the pond. Unlike the crow, the koi will actually try and eat you. But the biggest thing in this game is actually the house off in the distance. Being shrunk down to the size of an ant means that a normal house is a superstructure compared to you. And in this next game, there are some bosses that will make you feel like an ant. There are many God of War games, and they all seem to feature some enormous things. One of the most famous being God of War 3, during the fight between Kratos and Kronos. Kronos is absolutely gigantic and makes Kratos look like a flea in comparison. Kronos is so large that during the fight between him and Kratos, Kratos had to attack just his fingernail in this gruesome scene, with one fingernail being around 50 times the size of Kratos. In similar fashion, in God of War Ragnarok, we get a look at Jormungandr, or the World Serpent. Jormungandr is a giant serpent that, much like Kronos, makes Kratos look like a speck of dust. In God of War Ragnarok, Jormungandr resides in this area with a lake and some giant structures scattered around, which the World Serpent makes look like toys. Luckily, Jormungandr is actually an ally in God of War Ragnarok, otherwise Kratos might have been in some trouble, although I'm sure he would win in that battle anyways. Going back to those structures though, Megalophobia isn't just about giant creatures, it's about giant things in general. And there happen to be many giant structures through all of the God of War games. The God of War games are filled with giant buildings, statues, and mountains. But they are also all amazing story games that I recommend playing. And another game that I recommend playing is Shadow of the Colossus. Although I don't know much about this game, I'll try to do it justice. In Shadow of the Colossus, you get into a lot of fights with huge foes that all have super cool designs. There are a lot of massive enemies, so I'll just run through 3 of the biggest. Quadratus is a 4-legged beast that is covered in fur and has stone around its face that resembles a helmet. Quadratus is huge, and it requires you to bring it down in order to scale its leg to even do damage to it. There is another boss called Malus, who is a giant statue-like enemy. He is designed as a sort of moving castle made of stone, and probably the most human-like enemy in the game. Malus absolutely towers over you and puts up a good fight. He's got a really cool design and fight, however technically he's not the biggest. That title would go to Phalanx, a giant flying beast that's kind of like a worm, serpent, dragon thing. Phalanx is extremely long and has these huge fins that it drags through the sand. You have to use these fins in order to climb up it and strike it with a sword. Shadow of the Colossus is a really cool game that has some awesome designs and soundtrack. It's definitely worth playing, especially after the remaster that came out. But that does it for Megalophobia. So if this phobia interests you, then I definitely recommend watching CrescentX's amazing video on it. And since we are talking about giant serpent-like things, why don't we talk about Ophidiophobia, the fear of snakes. Much like spiders, snakes are a very common fear for people. Snakes are just creepy and dangerous. They have huge fangs and are kind of OP. Once again, there are a lot of games that include snakes at some point, so I just tried to pick out the ones with the creepiest snakes. Starting with God of War Ragnarok. You know that giant serpent we were talking about? Well, I feel like I had to mention Jormungandr again, since it is literally a giant snake. Although Jormungandr may not be the scariest, as we barely get to see it slither around and it's kind of unrealistic at its size. But also, is it just me or do snakes normally not have teeth? I know they have those 2 huge fangs, but all of those other teeth? Anyways, moving on to the classrooms, and bear with me because it may get confusing with the amount of rooms that will come out of my mouth. The Classrooms is a game based on a popular creepypasta called The Backrooms, and in case you don't know what that is, the Backrooms are basically another dimension filled with uncanny rooms that go on forever. However, there have been many interpretations of the Backrooms as it's quite a popular topic, with things like short films and games being made on it, all introducing different monsters and levels to the Backrooms. And the Classrooms is one of those games. You start in the Backrooms and progress through the different levels while being hunted by the various monsters on each level. But I'm here to talk about a specific level called the Pool Rooms. The Pool Rooms level is quite well known within the Backrooms topic. It consists of a weird endless array of rooms with the walls, floor and ceiling being made of this white tiling that can easily be associated with pools. It obviously also has pools everywhere. The Pool Rooms level is often thought of as a peaceful level of the Backrooms and is often associated with nostalgia. However, in the Classrooms, the Pool Rooms are not so peaceful, as there is an entity that lurks on the level. This entity creeps me out so bad and I don't know why, because I'm not even scared of snakes. It has a long, pale snake body, but its head is more human-like, although not quite a human face. The entity's face is also pale, and features piercing eyeballs as well as ragged hair hanging down. If the entity sees you, it will snap its head and lock eyes with you, and shortly after, will start slithering towards you. The entity is faster than you, so you have to pull off some maneuvers to get it off your tail. Overall, this serpent creature is absolutely terrifying in a few different ways, and really makes you watch your surroundings while playing this game. The next game is Sea of Thieves. Although it is a mainly water-based game, it has islands that are home to snakes. The snakes in this game aren't giant or have human faces, but that's what makes them scary. They're realistic. They hide in the grass making hissing noises, forcing you to quickly find them before they bite you. And the same can be said for Red Dead Redemption 2. This game has realistic snakes that will bite you and your horse. The snakes in these games are pretty dangerous, so I would recommend keeping your personal space. And speaking of space, Astrophobia, the fear of space. Do you ever see these amazing photos of space with things like massive stars or planets or even black holes? Yet as beautiful as they are, you can't help but get an eerie feeling from them. I mean, just thinking about how these things are real. Giant balls of flames 500 trillion times the size of the planet that we live on is kind of unsettling. Space is one of those things that is so mind-melting to think about and almost incomprehensible, which is what makes it cool and also terrifying. In No Man's Sky, you start off on an alien planet with all sorts of interesting flora and wildlife. You start exploring and gathering resources to upgrade your gear, and as you're exploring, you discover a rundown and broken spaceship. With this new discovery, you make it your goal to fix this spaceship with various materials in order to get off this planet. You begin to gather materials to craft the parts necessary to fix the spaceship. Once you've crafted all of these things, you place them into the spaceship one by one until it looks flyable. Even though it's a small spaceship that may not meet your expectations for space travel, you get in and use the launchers to lift off the surface of the planet. Then, you engage the thrusters and start accelerating upwards towards space. You begin to fly faster and faster until you leave the atmosphere, and although this means progress, it is still terrifying. Any ambient noises stop and leave you with an eerie silence. The only noise being a subtle humming from the thrusters of your spaceship. You turn your ship around to see how far you have travelled from your original planet, and as you look around, emptiness. A vast empty void, only filled by bright stars and occasional distant planets. You admire its beauty. All of those glowing stars and blue and green lively planets. This game really has some beautiful sights to see. However, it can also be really unsettling, thinking about the endlessness of the universe around you, and the absolute power held by these giant things floating around near us. For people with severe astrophobia, this may be the part where you just turn the game off and go play a different game. However, for anybody that continues to play, you will continue to fly through space for a while. And this adventure will lead you to a variety of different planets with all sort of resources, plant life, and wildlife. And you will end up going to some really cool looking space stations as well. This exploration will lead you to earning the in-game currency, units. And these units will help you afford upgrades for your spaceship and characters, such as better thrusters. And if you are successful enough, you'll be able to afford a new spaceship. Much bigger, faster, and better looking than your starting one. Using these newfound upgrades, you will begin to explore space phenomena that you haven't seen before, seeing things such as black holes. Overall, No Man's Sky is a game that portrays both the beauty and eeriness of space really well. It shows the beauty of the stars collecting around you as lights in a dark environment, while also showing you the endlessness and terror of space. In my eyes, Astrophobia actually resembles Thalassophobia quite a bit, as space is one of those things that can be so insanely beautiful yet also terrifying, much like the ocean. Much like a lot of the games I mention in this video, I really recommend playing No Man's Sky, especially as a nice change of pace from all those intense PvP games that will leave you feeling like a ghost. Phasmophobia, the fear of ghosts. We've all seen videos of paranormal activities and ghosts, and whether you believe in ghosts or not, those videos can still be pretty unsettling, and for some of us, absolutely terrifying. There happen to be a lot of games with ghosts in them, so it was hard to pick out the ones to talk about. However, I do think some games stick out from the others when it comes to ghosts. If you've ever heard of this game, then you probably knew it was coming, because it's a game called Phasmophobia. In Phasmophobia, you are sent to various haunted locations with the task to investigate clues and ultimately come to a conclusion on what type of ghost it is. Phasmophobia includes a pretty wide variety of ghosts, meaning you never know what you are getting into when visiting a haunted location. You explore and find things such as fingerprints, cold temperatures, and EMF readings. As you find these clues, you take notes in a journal provided to you, until you are able to conclude which ghost type has been haunting the location. But of course, while you are undergoing your investigation, said ghost will be scaring you, hunting you, and killing you if you aren't careful. The game includes various maps that vary in difficulty, some being scarier than others as well. Phasmophobia has pretty realistic graphics, making it a lot scarier. The ghosts in this game are able to show themselves and chase you around, which is terrifying, but by the end of your investigation, you'll be able to find out if it's something like a djinn or a demon. Daemonophobia, the fear of demons. This phobia is based around demons like the ones that you would see in hell. Therefore, it makes sense that this phobia is mostly derived from religious beliefs. But I think, religious or not, if anyone was to come face to face with a demon, they would be pretty scared. Mortuary Assistant is a game where you work a job as well a mortuary assistant. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, a mortuary assistant or a mortician is somebody who works at a mortuary, which is where bodies are sent to have procedures done to them in order to be stored before a burial or cremation. You have probably seen mortuaries in shows that involve cops or detectives. You know, those buildings where the bodies are in those metal cabinets on the slide-out trays with the cloth covering them and a tag on their toe. So mortuary assistant is all about performing those procedures on the bodies and storing them. However, something very sinister is happening in the background. Throughout the start of the game, you experience some creepy situations and end up finding out that you are being hunted by a demon and must complete a ritual in order to find out which body the demon resides, and then incinerate it along with a ritual item, ultimately leading to the exorcism of the demon and the hunt for you over. As you progress through the game, performing those procedures on the bodies as part of your job, you encounter increasingly terrifying paranormal activities, including this demon. Mortuary Assistant has some seriously unnerving scenes that will have you looking over your shoulder at night, including the bodies moving, faces in corners, and frequent jump scares. You don't get a moment's rest in this game, and that's what makes it such a good horror game, having you constantly looking around waiting for the next jump scare. Another game worth mentioning is Doom, a very popular game based around taking over hell, slaughtering any type of demon that gets in your way. Since this game is based off hell and demons, it could definitely fit into this category. However, I believe it wouldn't be quite as frightening, as you have powerful weapons that kill most demons, you have fast movement to run away, and the demons just sit around and then get into combat with you. In Doom, you don't feel so frightened and helpless due to all those factors, unlike Mortuary Assistant, where you are very limited in your capabilities. And that does it for the phobias. But I want to talk about why I think video games are so superior compared to things like movies when it comes to inducing fear. When I watch movies, I don't really get scared. Maybe a jump scare every now and then will get me, but compared to video games, that's nothing. When I'm playing video games, I have actual fear, not just frights from sudden noises or faces up close in the camera. And I was thinking about why. Why do video games make me so much more anxious? And I came to a conclusion. I think it's because it's us. We are the ones being hunted. We are the ones trapped in a dark room with a ghost. We are the ones that went there, and we are the ones that can't turn back. I think us being in control makes it feel more real. And you can die in games. There's no set outcome like a movie. What we do in a game could have consequences, and it would be our fault. But I would also like to say that lots of the games I mentioned not only portray these phobias really well, but also their beauty. I'm terrified of the ocean, but games like Subnautica, Sea of Thieves, and Abzu have me stopping to admire the beauty. Sure, I'm a bit creeped out by space, but No Man's Sky has me standing on a space station staring out of a window admiring. And some people find spiders beautiful, some people find insects amazing. Even in a game like Doom, where you are in hell, you can find beauty in the way the lava flows with that cool glow. I think it shows that everything in this world has some beauty to it. Even if you may hate it, someone loves it. Just like how some people might have hated this video, but some might have loved it.
Crazy about you since the day that I found you. Wasting all my damn time. Tell me why I'm so impatient. So impatient.